Alright gamers, and especially Nintendo fans, let's take a look at a Nintendo Switch exclusive that I considered one of the best games of 2022. Yes, released in March of last year to be exact, and that is Kirby and the Forgotten Land, released, as I said, exclusively on the Nintendo Switch. And you probably can also take note of the lack of physical copy. That is because, long story short, I decided to go digital on this one. So, without further ado, let's take a look and see why this game is so great. Now, before I get into this one, you probably should know, growing up as a kid, this franchise was probably one of my favorites right next to Mario and Sonic and Zelda. Primarily, I love the ones on Game Boy, the Dreamland games to be exact, and even up to NES with Kirby's Adventure, and even the Super NES. And I did enjoy some of the spin-offs for both the Super NES as well as the Game Boy. And even, of course, the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS, and even the Nintendo Switch leading up to this one. But all the adventure games, and I said adventure, not spin-off or sports or racing games, have all one thing in common. They're all 2D side-scrollers, so this is actually officially the first one in 3D. Like most gaming franchises, of course it's going to try to make that leap, and like most of these franchises, it's going to be either hit or miss. And yes, as I said before, this is the first official 3D Kirby game. Sorry, the N64 game doesn't count because that's technically 2.5D, and neither does Kirby Air Ride on GameCube because, well, that's a racing game, basically a Kirby version of Mario Kart. But let's not get off track here. Yes, this is officially the first 3D Kirby game. And after some of the chances that this franchise took, like with Kirby's The Epic Yarn, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, which I wasn't really a fan of these, I was more into Kirby's Return to Dreamland and Kirby Star Allies, which were simple, but they were more back to the basic style. So getting back to this game, I was a bit skeptical about this franchise's first shot at 3D, but then after playing the demo, my skepticism turned to excitement, and I was super hyped to be able to play this game for the first time, because this game definitely lived up to the hype. It's a 3D platformer with occasionally sort of a 2D feel to it, almost similar to something like Super Mario Odyssey or 3D World. Yeah, just play those games and you'll know what I'm talking about. But otherwise, yes, it is still a 3D game. And of course it wouldn't be a 3D game without its plot, and that is Kirby's universe, also known as Dreamland, gets sucked out. He gets transported into an Earth-like planet and interacts with Earth-like things like roads and cities and actual civilization. So like Mario Odyssey, which was sort of giving me the similar vibes, I was, again, a bit skeptical, wondering if this was going to flop or if this was going to actually work out. But just like that game, I worried for nothing, because it plays and controls great. All the graphics and everything with its animation is just gorgeous. The music, soundtrack, and everything looks and sounds great. And yeah, taking place in a seemingly abandoned, rundown world you'd think would fail, but thankfully, with this game, it doesn't. I mean, talk about vibrant. I mean, look at all the colors here and everything. It's much more appealing to the eye than you would expect. But anyway, you start out through this world, as I mentioned, make your way through, get your bearings with the controls, which should seem and feel very natural and familiar, just in 3D, but don't let that deviate from your expectations. As I said, it works and controls great. You got all the different types of moves, which should seem familiar for any fans of this franchise, alongside a whole bunch of new things, which I'll get into it in a little bit, but yes, you got most of the familiar gameplay mechanics, which most of you Kirby fans should feel right at home with. You got walking, which you can do forward and backwards and all around since, like I said, this is a 3D game. Jumping, floating, sucking stuff up, spitting it out. Then you got the sliding move, which can be a little tricky to figure out how to do. Yeah, you gotta hold one of these top buttons, whether it's L or R, to crouch, and then press A, and there you go. Simple enough. But most importantly, you got the return of Kirby's most trademark move, which is sucking up enemies and swallowing them, stealing their abilities. Now that's what I'm talking about there. And most of the familiar ones are back, with the addition of a bunch of new ones. But again, I'll get into that in a little bit. As for the returning ones, you got the sword, the hammer, the boomerangs, the spikes. You got the fire ability, which when you're on the ground, you breathe fire. But when you're in the air, you become a fast-moving flaming fireball for a brief moment. You got the ice ability, which, as you guessed, helps you freeze over enemies and objects and push them right out of the way. And you probably also noticed with this ability is that you go slip sliding around like a figure skater, which I guess makes sense since it's an ice ability. It doesn't really have much usage, that is until you come across lava later on in the game, because you can walk, or I should say skate, right over it unharmed. Yeah, pretty cool, might I say. You also get the tornado ability, which most of you probably remember from Kirby's Adventure, as well as the sharp needle spikes, and yes, even the sleep ability, which is just as useless as you remember. But just like that game, it thankfully wears off after a couple of tedious seconds. Yeah, when you see these guys, just kill them. Yeah, sleep that off. But, for all you Kirby's Adventure fans, you do get the return of the crash ability, which is a little tricky to find. And just like that game, it gives you the chance to, well, as you guessed, blow up enemies all around you. But again, you also only get one usage out of it, so use it wisely. You also get the bomb throwing ability, which you probably remember was in Kirby's Return to Dreamland and several other entries in this franchise. But sadly, that's all the returning ones. Yeah. No rock ability? Yeah, to turn into a stone, slide down and take enemies out, which, okay, I get it. This is the first 3D Kirby game, and compared to a 2D side-scroller, which pans out a lot better, I could see what they were going for, but it would have been nice to have that ability. As well as the spark ability, not in here. The laser beams, yeah, the diagonal ones that he shoots around that come from those one-eyed enemies. Hell, it would have been great to even have the freaking speed wheel. But you do get something close to that, which I'll get into in a little bit, because there are only 2 new copy abilities that you get from enemies. You got the drill ability, which, well, you can drill at enemies and attack them, and most notably, dig underground and pop up right underneath an enemy and take them right out. Yeah, take that. But it's most useful for trying to get to a spot that is usually blocked off by a fence or a gate or anything that you can't just walk through. And last but not least, you get the ranger ability. Yep, you get a musket and you can shoot things. Or you can hold the button in, target enemies and objects, and even go target shooting in one level. And, well, all I could say is lock and load and fire. Yeah, pretty badass and awesome, I must say. In a few levels, you do get that invincibility lollipop that you remember that, as you guessed, gives you invincibility for a short time. As well as your health meter, which you do have to keep an eye on, because when you hit enemies or any types of hazards, you lose health. And when you lose all your health, you lose coins out of your inventory, which, again, I'll get into that in a little bit, but I do have to pinpoint, it's again like Mario Odyssey, where it deducts coins instead of lives. But otherwise, yes, to refill it, you do get the return of the more traditional familiar items that you remember in past Kirby games, like the bottles, which give it a partial refill, and the tomatoes, which fill it up all the way. But you do also get all sorts of new ways to refill your health, in the form of all different types of foods and drinks. And I mean any different types of foods and drinks. Ice cream, burgers, candy, popcorn, meats, fruits, donuts, sodas. Yes, even sodas that come out of the vending machine when you're in control of them. Which, okay, brings me to the newest feature in the game, the mouthful ability. This is basically the game's newest feature that definitely sticks out amongst all others. Like I said before, this game definitely gives me Super Mario Odyssey vibes, and, well, this almost reminds me of Cappy's possession ability, which he takes control of things. The mouthful ability is the same sort of thing. You take control of any items or vehicles or any type of inanimate objects,
by sucking them up. Yeah, I guess that makes sense to call it the mouthful ability since Kirby has a big enough mouth to be able to suck up something so big and take control of it on top of that. And the ideas behind this ability are endless. There's tons of things, as I said, you can take control of. You have cars. Yeah, that's right. Kirby can commit a Grand Theft Auto and get road rage on top of that. But anyway, yeah, you can take control of the car by speeding up, the direction it goes in, braking, speeding up and jumping ramps, ramming into and destroying things. Well, almost everything, because there's some things that can get in your way when you're driving. And there's even a few levels which you have to drive and make it across a race course and beat out a certain time limit to rescue one of your friends. Get into that in a little bit. But yes, every single one of these things has its purpose most of the time for progressing through each level. You got the traffic cone, which most of the time allows you to stomp things by, well, turning the thing upside down and stomping it. Usually it's any breakable surfaces, enemies, like these giant turtle things. Yeah, you can just break their shell, and there you go. Takes them right out. You can control these big ring-shaped things, which allows you to blow a big gust of air. Most useful, obviously, for blowing on anything that requires wind, like these windmill-shaped things. And this is also useful for when you hop on a boat, whether it's on water or lava. Yeah, a boat on lava. Find that a little bit far-fetched, but okay. Anyway, yeah. You obviously take control of the boat by facing away the direction you want to go in. Yeah, it's a little tricky, but it makes sense, though. You can take control of these roller coaster things on tracks. Whee! But you do have to be mindful of what's coming at you and what to collect and what not to hit, because you're in control of moving this thing left, right, or keeping it vertical. Yeah, because you may end up hitting or collecting things depending on what angle you're tilted at here. You can take control of round little grill-looking things, which usually you're just breaking it open because there's something inside most of the time. And yeah, you gotta kind of mess around with the analog stick to get it to do so. Same goes with the filing cabinets that are usually blocking our way through a wall. Mess about with the analog stick too, and timber! Good riddance. You take control of these scaffolds, which are basically shaped like stairs. Which, most of the time when you do this, it's usually a bit of a puzzle solver right here. You move them, and you can tip them over to destroy enemies or any breakable objects. Same goes for when you take control of a scissor forklift, except you're lowering and raising the level of it, while moving it left and right, and taking out enemies. But you do also have to be mindful of hazards that can actually take away your health. Oh, and it also helps you get to higher grounds too. Well, only when you spit it out, that is. In fact, yeah, you could spit out any of these mouthful abilities at any time, just like you can with spitting out the copy abilities you get from enemies. But that's not all, because you also get the light bulb, which you can turn on and off anytime you have it, and is most useful for lighting your way through any dark places like, well, underground caverns. Even though it does also slow down your movement a little bit when the light is on, as well as attracts these frickin' enemies like moths. But it also does help turn on and activate these contraptions, which obviously some of them are required for progressing. You got the pipe, which allows Kirby to roll down a slope, but unfortunately you can't stop in your tracks. No, but you do have the jump ability, so when you come across gaps, you obviously have to jump at a timely manner. But thankfully, this allows you to take out any enemy and any breakable wall or object that gets in your way. Then you got the arch glider ability, which, like it sounds, allows Kirby to, what else? Glide. Not too hard to control. Ascending, descending. You fly through rings, of course, to help speed yourself up. And you spin when you come across enemies and hazards to avoid losing health. You got the water balloon ability, which allows Kirby to suck up as much water as he can from a water spigot, resembling a water balloon. Okay, you got me there. But anyway, this helps try to take out enemies, but most importantly, try to take out anything that you can't take out with any other ability. Like mud, or this purple gooey stuff, lava, and even help water plants. Aw, it's so nice of Kirby to give the plants a drink, isn't he? Though, just like the light bulb, it does slow down your movement. And because you have a limited amount of water you can spit out, you are going to run out eventually. But no biggie there. Just find a water spigot and refill. Simple as that. And, last but not least, take control of a truck. But that's not till the last level of the game, not to jump the gun, but that is still pretty cool, and it's quite a mouthful, might I say. But now we're really jumping the gun, because you do have 7 worlds to get through. World 1, which you pretty much saw a lot of, is the basic grass world, with a lot of rundown cities and buildings and such. World 2, Everbay Coast, is basically the typical water world, with a lot of beaches and water and sea creatures, the kind of stuff you expect to see. World 3 is Wonderia Remains. Doesn't look much like what it sounds like, because it's more of a carnival-ish type world. Yeah. You know, attractions, carnivals, race cars, an indoor spook funhouse. And this is probably my favorite world out of them all. World 4, Winter Horns, just like it sounds, is a winter world. Yeah, you know, snow, ice, water that's so dangerously ice cold that you obviously can't swim in it. Not much more to say there. World 5, Original Wasteland, which is basically a desert-ish world, with the typical types of traits you expect to see out of it, including an abandoned shopping mall. Okay, interesting place to put one of those. Then you got Redgar Forbidden Lands, and it's what you'd expect considering it's the second to last world as you're making your way towards the end of the game. Lava, fireballs, what more do you expect? And then, last but not least, the last world, Lab Discovera. Yes, this is the final world and only has one stage, leading up to the game's final boss. Yeah, as you progress through the game and pass each world, each one contains more and more stages to get through, and of course, end with a boss fight. That's to be expected, obviously. Although I did mention before about rescuing his friends, right? Yeah, you know, these cute little guys known as Waddly Dees. That is because in each stage, there are 3 of them, sometimes more. And while some of them are easy to find, others can be a little more trickier and hidden and obviously require a bit of problem solving to reach or find. But you can rescue more of them in each stage by completing all sorts of different various tasks, which usually start out easy. Some of them are simple, but then later on in the game they can get pretty tricky. And there's many of them. It could be anything. Most of the time, you're not going to know what that task or objective is to freeing one of them until you actually completed it. So I guarantee you're not going to be able to get every single one in this game unlocked. But it's best to try to get as many as you can because, well, just like collecting the green stars in Super Mario 3D World or rescuing your friends in Astro Bot Rescue Mission, there's a certain amount required for unlocking the boss fight at the end of each world. So it's best to collect and rescue as many of these Waddly Dee pals as you possibly can, because like I said, collecting a certain amount is required for progressing throughout the entire game. And yes, you can backtrack and collect ones that you probably missed. This right here gives the game plenty of variety and replayability as well. You also can collect in a lot of levels these things which contain all sorts of different figures, which almost resemble amiibos. But unlike the Waddly Dees, these serve no purpose whatsoever. They're pretty much on the same level as the stamps in Super Mario 3D World. So, unless you're looking to get a 100% perfect completion of this game, there's not really much purpose of collecting these. Even though they look pretty cool, but no. The Waddly Dees are your main focus of what you want to collect in this game, as well as coins, which you can use to buy upgrades, alongside, of course, the different stars that you get in the bonus levels. Or, in this game, they're actually called the Treasure Road stages. And as expected, there's several of them in each world. They always involve a different type of challenge, but there's also a bit of a catch to them as well. Every single copy ability that you get from enemies is usually utilized in these stages, as well as their upgrades. That's right, each one of these copy abilities gets at least 1 or 2 upgrades that you get in the village, and each one of these upgrades not only requires coins and these stars, but also different blueprints that could be picked up throughout just about any level throughout the entire game. You bring it back to the weapons upgrade shop in the Waddle Dee town, which I do have to add is almost like another side game within this one, if that makes any sense. Because every time you beat a world, you get a different part of this town rebuilt and unlocked. Just about anything. You could do any side games, and these of course are helpful with trying to acquire more coins, like working in the cafe and feeding the Waddle Dees in a feeding frenzy. Like literally, you're under a time constraint, and while the first one is easy, you obviously only get 2 choices in which you have to get their orders right. Otherwise, well, see that big meter next to the time limit on the top? Well, the more orders you screw up, or the more time you wait trying to get their orders in, it empties out quicker. Basically, it's the customer satisfaction meter, and if it runs completely out, then the gig ends quicker than the time limit says it does. And believe me, it starts out slow, especially on the easiest difficulty, but the more farther you get, especially when you reach the lunch rush part of it, oh boy, it goes quicker, and there's no screwing up the orders. I mean, you have to think fast and also get the orders right at the same time. It's a real endurance game right here. And this, as I said before, is just the easy difficulty. You unlock the 2 other difficulties. The second one adds another item to the menu, and then the third one adds yet another item to the menu. 4 different items you have to choose from and think fast with, which thankfully though, you do get sort of a sneak peek at the item which the customer wants, so as soon as you sort of see it and you think it's the right one, there you go. But again, it's a great way to earn coins. Even if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, the coins will still accumulate. And not only you can work there, but you can also buy items from there which are helpful with refilling your health when it gets low. You can either eat it right there, or you can take it on the go. It's almost like carrying an item in Mario Bros. 3, but unlike that game where you can carry multiple items to use, this one you can only carry one, and you can also choose which one you want to keep. So, it's best to get the one that refills your health all the way when it gets low, because you can not only use it on the map, but you can also use it in the level as well. You also got fishing in this small little pond here, which is pretty simple and straightforward. Cast your line out, and you follow the button commands to reel the fish in. The bigger and heavier the fish, the more coins you get. Not much to say there. You got the tilt and roll game, which, like it sounds, you tilt and roll a little Kirby marble around a little maze on a wooden board, avoiding all the obstacles and pits, making it from the starting point to your destination point. Pretty simple at first, and then the second one gets a little more trickier, having to control 2 of them. And then the last one, wow. It gets even more tougher. Might I add, this is probably the only time in the game I recall that requires the usage of motion controls. Yeah, it almost kind of reminds me of that little ball maze thing on Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Remember those annoying things? Well, it's pretty much giving me those similar vibes. But again, another good way to make some coins on the side. Even though they actually cost some to play, you have to pay. Even if you fail, you still gotta do it again. In other words, it's sort of a gamble, but it pays off if you succeed. And if you think that's hard, try it on the harder difficulty. Yeah, this time they place these spiked enemies that kill you instantly, and if you want a shit ton of coins, you gotta beat it under a certain time. So, all I could say is, good luck trying to beat this with this many enemies, because I simply couldn't do it. Even the second hardest one, you have to control 2 of them. And then the third one, I couldn't even make it past this. Yeah, to anybody who thinks they can beat these, good luck. Because I simply couldn't do it. You got plenty of other shops and places that you can visit. More or less some of them are for show. Like the movie theater where you can rewatch clips that you probably have already seen before if you played through the entire game. You got a band, which you have the option of paying coins. Yeah, you know, like those performers on the street that are looking for some quick cash. But you don't really have to, obviously. But you can choose any song from this game, and they'll play it. Pretty sweet. You can go on top of this tall tower to get a nice view of the village. You can go into your house if you want to take a snooze. Or read this book, which contains still images and short summaries of majority of the Kirby games that came before this one. There's the post office, which if you actually know the codes, you put them in and you can get some cool stuff unlocked. Yeah, just look it up online, like most people do. You got this shop that sells 3 types of boosts, like a life boost, which you can only carry 1, an attack and speed boost, you can hold up to 3 of them. Pretty handy, I'll say, if you're trying to make it through some hard levels, or boss fights, or even enter the Colosseum, which, just as it sounds, is an arena fight against many mini-boss fights and major boss fights that you fought throughout the entire game. Before each match, of course, you can choose a copy ability, and just refill your health. But they don't always stay there, because each fight you have to complete without losing all of your health. So it's basically like a gladiator tournament. Pretty appropriate for this kind of place, wouldn't you say? But yep, it's a fight to the death against all the mini-bosses and major boss fights that you face throughout the entire game. With one little addition, Meta Knight. That's right, he makes a return, and it's very reminiscent of Kirby's Adventure. Slash him until his metal face shield comes right off. Pretty sweet. But yeah, if you can make it through this entire endurance round, then good for you, because it can get pretty damn tough. And as I said, these are the bosses that you face throughout the entire game. You got some familiar faces making a return, like the giant tree, who, despite being rather simple in the past entries in the series, definitely has a few more tricks up his sleeve, or I should say roots, to make the fight a little more interesting, I must say. As well as King Dedede, who makes a return not once in his normal form at the end of the Winter World, but also in the Volcano World as Forgo Dedede with all this armor on him. I mean, damn. So as well as a couple of returning faces, there are some new ones, like this big gorilla, this acrobatic cheetah, this oversized spinning and dancing armadillo. And I should also mention that in the Volcano World, 2 stages before you fight Forgo Dedede, you do a rematch against all 3 of these in this one stage. Yeah, they do the same sort of thing as they do in Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. No surprise here, since it's nearly the end of the game. But after you take down Forgo Dedede, he actually helps you because apparently he was possessed, and then you make your way up to the next set of 3 last bosses in the game, and the first one is Leongar, King of the Beasts, which I have to say is pretty appropriate because he's a big-ass lion. And he can be pretty tough. He's not afraid to fight by attacking you with his big claws and doing all sorts of other moves. But then after you beat him, the next fight is against him again, after he transforms into this repulsive-looking gooey substance thing. Yeah, basically he follows you down this long corridor, so you have to dodge his moves and avoid him, while at the same time also attacking him with stars and stuff that he throws at you, or using whatever copy ability that you have. Either way, you have to drain his health, obviously. And then it's on to the very last fight against Fecto Elfilis. Yeah, this guy is no slouch. I mean, beating him is no easy task. This right here is what you call a hard last boss. He'll fly far away, where you can barely see him, throw several spears at you, which you obviously have to dodge. But like anything else, it also summons stars, which are obviously essential to sucking up and spitting out at him, once you get the right window to do so. Unless you're using a copy ability. But either way, you want to do damage to him when the timing is right. Otherwise, yes, he'll do that. And then on the ground, he'll swipe at you with the giant spear in a circular motion, which can really be tougher to dodge. And also does the same thing on the ground as he does in the air by throwing a whole bunch of those spears, which also summon stars. He'll also attack you from above with his giant spear by driving it into the ground really fast. But then he'll do it again, kind of digging and grinding the ground out, making it temporarily harmful to the touch, but also in a slow motion sort of state, which thankfully makes it much easier to dodge, and he does it several times in one shot. He'll also summon these giant spears, which are basically almost as big as he is, which create these large and obviously harmful shock waves. I mean, Jesus, you think that's enough? No. The worst is, of course, when he creates this big beam of light that can really kick the shit out of you. So it's obviously best to avoid it by all costs. And that's only the first part of the fight. The second part of the fight, oh boy, it's even harder. I mean, he goes as far as to throw giant meteors at you. God damn. He still does the same crap as he does before with the spear. You know, flying by and digging up the ground with it, charging at you with it, throwing a whole bunch of the spears at you with it, and of course swiping at you with it even more times. But then he gets even more cheap with his moves. Like a coward, he multiplies into 3, making you guess which one is the right one. Yeah, it's one of those kind of things. So you have to obviously guess and attack the right one, while also trying to dodge this charge wave. And then when you finally do manage to drain all of his health, you still have your little pal you have to suck out of him by using the mouthful ability and pressing the analog stick rapidly in the direction it says to. Yeah, there's several parts in the game where you have to do this, obviously. And even after all that, he's still not down. But this is where the game gets really cool, because like I said before with the mouthful ability, you get to, and this is the only time you do so, get to suck up and take control of a truck. Hell yeah. That is freaking awesome. Though of course you do have to be cautious while driving, not fall off of where you're supposed to be driving, and at the same time also dodge anything that's coming at you that's trying to kill you. But hey, who doesn't love to be able to drive through concrete walls and destroy them, as well as destroy a bunch of other things? Jump over buildings that are just being placed there for you to drive over. But yeah, you continuously drive through obstacles and over jumps and everything like that, until eventually you finish him off by pushing this giant-ass meteor that he's trying to strike at you with, by rapidly pressing the B button, and then eventually, yeah, doing this shit again by rapidly pressing the analog stick in the direction that it says to. And then eventually, with the help of your little friend that you freed from him, his reign of terror is finally over, the day is saved, thus ending your adventure in the Forgotten Land. Way to go, Nintendo, you've done great once again, giving us a great actual first 3D adventure game for this cute and badass little pink guy, with a lot of great music, beautiful, colorful, vibrant graphics, gameplay elements and mechanics that are fresh and familiar at the same time, and not only a great one-player mode, but also the addition of a two-player mode, which we actually have seen on a Kirby game in the past. Tons of replayability, bonus games and side quests, and tons of extra content, which makes this game yet another reason to own a Nintendo Switch, as a great, fantastic exclusive to be able to play not only at home, but also on trips or wherever you go. And all I can say is, once again, bravo, Nintendo. You done great, giving us one of the best games of 2022. So, my final verdict on this one, a Rockin' Weird Wii Motion Plus up and a Plain Weird Mode up. Yep, this is one mouthful of an awesome adventure for the first time in 3D. So, till next time, happy gaming.